Okay, this stone here is fairly typical of what you might find in a cemetery. It's also what you might find in all kinds of different situations when trying to do 3D photogrammetry of whatever it is you're trying to photograph and scan. So we've got a couple things to deal with. Okay, one, it's a fairly big stone. So depending on your height, you may need to either have a step stool or have a pole on which you can put your camera up higher to get the top of the monument. We've also got a fair amount of detail on the stone. You can see these corner carvings on these carved pillars on the corners of the monument, as well as up here on the corners at the top, that you're going to want to make sure that you are adequately photographing at a close in detailed level enough that it's going to capture that detail. You don't want to get in too close, or the software is not going to be able to align that image with images that are out here, particularly when you've got fairly uniform carving that isn't all that different on one side versus the other. Now, the one thing that this monument does have that can be a challenge if you don't think about it is that it does have overhangs. And so we always want to make sure that we're getting down low with our camera and we're shooting around the monument at a low angle so that we can capture the under portion of this particular area right here and the under portion of this area up here. If we don't take those specific photographs, the software is not going to recreate that overhang properly, and you're going to end up with potentially some bubbles in your model where it's trying to interpolate, or just not end up with holes. One final thing to point out on a monument like this is the fact that you've got this very high relief carving of the name. And so you want to get in and make sure you have some photographs that are angled downward like this. You want to make sure that you've got some photographs that are angled, sorry about that, the camera went a little crazy here, that are being angled up from the bottom too, to catch the bottoms of those letters. Remember, if you can't see it in at least 2 to 3 photographs, you're not going to get it recreated in 3-dimensional space. Another situation that I'm often asked about with 3D scanning is, what do you do when the subject of your scan, say for instance this particular grave monument here, is very close to adjacent grave monuments or a wall or just something that's very close to what it is that you really want to scan in 3 dimensions? How do you make sure that you capture all sides? Well, obviously it's very easy to catch this side of the monument, and it's very easy to catch the back side of the monument. But how do you make sure that you're able to capture and recreate those faces of the monument that are close adjacent to one another? So for instance, how do we make sure that we get this side of the monument? Well, we do so in exactly the same way that I'm doing here, that you can see in the video. You get down and you get close in so that you can look into that gap from an angle, and you make sure you take a series of photographs down. You take a series of photographs from above that looks down into the angle as much as possible. And again, you get down in here and you try and capture as much as you can from that lower angle looking in from the other side. So if you shoot it from this side, shoot in from this side, you shoot in from the top, and with enough photographs of those areas, it'll recreate that nicely, even though you are not able to get in here and come around the whole monument closely enough. Like this one tombstone is occluding your surface and you can't get it all at once. So close monuments can be tricky, but you just got to think about what the camera is seeing, what it's not, and make sure that you're seeing everything in the photographs that the software needs to recreate all aspects of the monument. Here's a grave monument that's going to be a challenge to really capture all the detail that the stone carver put into this beautiful monument. It's got lots and lots of detailed carving. It also has a very, very rough surface to it, where it's very roughly chiseled. You want to try to capture all that geometry in your 3D scan. In order to do so, though, you're going to be wanting to take a lot of pictures, particularly of that detailed area in the front. So as we walk around here and just look at what we consider to be like an index ring, you know, I'm out, I'm catching the whole monument in the frame. I'd be able to see scales if I had them on the ground. Once I've got that whole ring completed, then I'm going to come in, going to make sure that I'm getting some shots looking down on the top of the monument, coming all the way around it. Again, make sure to catch that top really well. And then I'm going to spend some time really trying to focus in on these areas here with the detailed carving. So you can see all of these chisel marks in here, the detail in the leaf carving. We want to capture all of that as much as possible in the geometry. You also notice something that we run into a lot with cemeteries, as well as 3D scanning out in nature, in the real world, or on archaeological projects, is you've got some cobwebs and some vegetation, not lichen, but some vegetation that's stuck to the monument, pine needles, some leaf fragments. You can take a whisk broom and gently, or a paintbrush, and gently brush those away before you do the scanning, because the software is good enough that it will pick that up and it'll try and recreate that little blob of spiderweb, or that blob of pine needles, or that little leaf area down in there that you can just kind of see. So how do we get this relief carving really well scanned? Well, just a matter of catching it from lots of different angles. So you might come across the monument this way, taking a series of pictures, one after another, making sure you get your roughly 60% overlap from one to the next. So you move about 40% of the frame each time. Come down, come across in another row, doing the same thing. Come down, cross in another row, and you kind of get the idea. And then once you get down to the very bottom, then you start angling your camera upward and repeat the process. Don't get too great of an angle on it, or you run the risk of having the upper portion of your frame out of focus with your lower portion, depending on the depth of field that you're able to get. And you're just going to work across. And on this stone, you can see even at the bottom of the inscription, there's an indentation that you would really want to work hard to try to get down in there, underneath there enough, and capture all of that that's going on down there. Okay, so you're going to get the undersides coming up. Make sure you're getting in there. Again, lots of shots on the thing. You don't want to get in too close, or otherwise it won't be able to figure out where to put the image, but you also want to be in close enough that that detailed carving is taking up a lot of your pixel real estate in each of your images. Another thing, you want to come in and you want to get some additional shots side to side. So come in, shoot a whole series of images from the side here like this. Come over a little bit, do the same thing. Come over a little bit, do the same thing, and then turn around and do the other side. And do the same thing. With enough patience and enough good in-focus images, shouldn't be a problem to capture that detail. Might have a longer processing time because of all the images, but in the end it'll be worth it because you'll have a really good model that in the geometry all that detail is there. You're not just relying on the color texturing to show a person what that tombstone looked like, or more importantly, if you're doing this from a preservation standpoint, that three-dimensional geometry preserves the three-dimensional geometry of the original into the future. After it erodes some more, you have an archival record of the year that you took the photographs, what that tombstone looked like. So if it gets damaged in the future, gets eroded, gets stolen, gets destroyed, we have the actual 3D geometry. Here we're at a very typical monument in a U.S. cemetery. We've got a statue carving on top of a more rectangular type pediment. This has a lot of challenges that are similar to some of the other ones that we've looked at in particular for challenging tombstones and challenging scanning situations. So here we've got a lot of detail on the statue itself. We've got lots of folds of fabric. We've got detail in the wreath being held by the Virgin Mary. We've got detailed carved ivy crawling up the cross that she's holding. And these are all going to present some challenges if you want to capture that in the actual 3D geometry. Again, just like with some of the other monuments, it's time, it's patience, lots of images, images in focus, and images most particularly in the correct angle or taken from the correct angle. So in this case, some of the things to think about. One, always start off with your index shots. So start out broad, get a good ring of index around the entire monument. Okay, out. Then come in, do a closer index ring, particularly of the statue itself. And then you want to start thinking about occluded surfaces, meaning surfaces that are not visible when other surfaces are in the way, or surfaces that are not visible within the frame from where you're taking the photograph. So some things to really think about. If we look here, we want to get up in here and we want to get in and get angled shots of the individual's face in the statue. We want to make sure that we're getting shots looking up in underneath the chin, into some of those dark areas depending on the lighting, so that we can make sure we're going to capture those areas. As I mentioned on another tombstone, you want to make sure you brush away these cobwebs, some of the vegetation. Again, do not try to scrape off lichens. Those are part of the stone at this point, and you can damage the monument if you try to remove those. I'm talking about these loose bits that are just vegetation that's stuck from seasonal leaf fall and pine needles, etc. So you also want to make sure that you're getting in under here underneath the arm of the cross. If you're not getting in there and getting photographs, software isn't going to see it. It's not going to recreate it. It's going to try and attach that arm of the cross down into the other portions of the statue. And so you're going to end up not with a cross, but with a more triangular shape coming down from the arm of the cross and joining onto the upright. You're also going to want to make sure that you get some downward facing shots on the statue. In particular, you want to make sure as you're doing the base, you're getting in there and getting able to shoot down so you catch things like the statue's toes. You're also going to want to use a ladder, step ladder, or stool, or even a pole with your camera on the top of it and a remote control to get up in there and get above the statue so that you can look down on top of those areas and make sure you're getting the tops of the statue's head, that you're getting the tops of the cross and the very top of the cross upright. Again, it's a challenging situation, but it can be done. Another challenge with the monument like this one is it might be hard to see in this light for you, but the stone is polished. The inscription has a more matte finish around it, but the letters themselves are polished granite, and most of the stone of the pediment is polished granite. Polished, shiny surfaces, particularly in sunny conditions, can cause a lot of problems with trying to do 3D photogrammetry. Photogrammetry does not like lots of highlights and reflections in the material that it's trying to recreate. But again, in good light, with patience, with a lot of photographs from the right angles, even the detail that you can see in here that is really just a difference between shiny and matte finish of the stone, this detail can be brought out in the actual geometry of the photogrammetry because those matte areas are inset 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter deep into the stone. So again, take time, take the patience, get the photographs, you'll get a good result. So in the case of this tombstone here, we've got a lot of challenges to get an effective scan. As you can see, represents a version of a Celtic cross, and it's got piercings through the monument, as you can see there, with the stone being cut through the hallway. We also have issues of underhangs. See here. Okay, that we're going to have to try to capture by getting down and getting photographs under them. So, how do we deal with a monument like this? Well, just like any other monument, start way out, get your index shots going all the way around the monument so that the software knows where to place photographs once you're in doing detail work. Okay. You want to try and get this one on as cloudy a day as possible so your lighting is uniform because the back of it here is in shadows. Now, we're then going to want to make sure that we get down in underneath here And we take shots coming around underneath. So we definitely get the bottom of the cross arms in here, go all the way around. And we're also going to want to get in here at certain angles so that we can see all aspects of those cutouts. So you're going to come around taking lots of shots in order to get both the sides and the inside upper portions and the inside lower portions. The more that you can capture those insides of those cross arms through those piercings, the better result you're going to get of the scan actually recreating that there are holes through that monument. You're also going to want to get up high and photograph the tops very well to make sure that you're definitely getting the tops of the arms and, more importantly, the tops of this kind of crenellation on the top of the monument. So again, a very challenging stone, but a stone that is definitely possible to capture a good scan of. Just might take a little bit of time, might take a little bit more photographs than normal, and might take you a couple different tries.